Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. The average large enterprise has 24 million vulnerabilities. The good news is only 5% will probably be exploited. But which 5%? That's where Kenna comes in. Kenna Security's modern vulnerability management technology combines real-time threat intelligence, data science, and automated risk analysis to prioritize the vulnerabilities that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Team up with Kenna Security and make the most of your limited resources. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Kenna Security. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is flat networks inside the cloud and data center that allow threats to move laterally and compromise vulnerable targets. But microsegmentation using traditional firewalls is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation. Using the identity of machines and software that are communicating, Edgewise offers the strongest protection that adapts automatically to changes. Protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network by visiting securityweekly.com/Edgewise. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. A quick announcement: B-Sides Boston is back in action for the 10-year anniversary. The conference will be held on Saturday, September 26th. Tickets are $10. You can get yours at bsidesbos.org and check out their Discord server, where Security Weekly will have our own channel and be doing some contests and answering questions. James Spiteri is a solutions architect for Elastic, where he also serves as the company's cybersecurity specialist for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Prior to that, he gained extensive experience as an Elasticsearch user, including at RS2 Software, as well as while serving as the security architecture manager for Invenisec. The landing page for Elastic is securityweekly.com/Elastic. Make sure you go there and check out all the things Elastic, including many free and open source offerings, which we'll be discussing today. James, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be on here.
Nice to have you. Thanks for staying up late and hanging with us tonight.
No worries.
And James, you've got some really, well, I guess first, to kind of get to know you a little bit, James, how did you get your start in information security?
That's a great question. And in reality, I just stumbled into it. So the first job I ever had in infrastructure and IT, I started off as like a first-line support guy. And it was one of those things where, I always loved technology. I always loved computers. Never dawned on me to do anything else as part of my career. But this company, so the first company I ever worked for, had a really highly secure environment. So I just learned how to do things naturally in a secure way. So it would never dawn on me, even when I started setting up a web server without TLS. That would be I didn't even know you could do that. So it was that kind of environment. So from there, my passion for security really grew. So it started off from the infrastructure side, but then it grew onto the defensive side. And then I moved on to, building my own security operations centers and just kicked off from there. So I was just thrown into it, and the passion for it really grew straight away. So a bit of a lucky chance, but here we are.
Awesome. Now, there's some really interesting things happening at Elastic, including some very significant contributions to the security community and open source community, which is also giving back, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. So, James, kind of take us through what's available and what's been made available recently.
Sure. So, we've been on a journey to build a security offering based on the Elastic Stack for just about 2 years now, with the first offering of a free and open SIEM back in June 2019. And we've been iterating on that ever since. And everything has always been free and open. But more recently, we've made two pretty big, significant contributions. So the first of those being, we now have an open detections repository. So as of version 7.6 of the stack, we started shipping a detections engine. We never had that concept before. And obviously, we included pre-built rules. So we have our own, obviously, research team and detection engineering team. And for the first couple of versions, they were still figuring out how are we going to publish rules and maintain them and test them. And once that was all put together and there was a really good framework to do it, we decided to completely open that repository. So now there's a GitHub repo on the Elastic site with close to 300 detection rules, which means, apart from the fact that we'll keep contributing in the open, anyone can now contribute. So any user of the Elastic Security product can go ahead and make use of any either Elastic contributed rules or community contributed rules. So that's the first thing. And more recently than that, so a couple of weeks ago, we announced a free and open endpoint technology. So particularly malware detection and prevention, which we inherited from Endgame, the company we joined forces with just about a year ago now, and really deep security telemetry collection. So like that's all open. So enterprise grade malware detection and prevention is now free. So anyone can go and use it for as long as they like in any environment that they like. So those are the two most recent contributions that we made.
That's really awesome.
My cat is trying this.
Thank you for that. So take us through the architecture a little bit, because there's the Elastic Common Schema, and I guess talk about what that is, and then in relation to kind of the open rules based project that you just open source as well.
Sure. So before we actually went on this,
and you have a visitor.
We do, yeah.
Another
so
guest.
It's my cat named Mouse, ironically. He's probably probably complaining because we're still awake.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we had to do before we ever put together any form of security product or detection rules or any of that good stuff, we needed a schema. We needed a naming convention. So reason being is, the Elastic Stack itself is totally agnostic to data. And so you can throw anything in there, whether that's a firewall log, an endpoint logs, proxy, infrastructure metrics, doesn't matter, you can put it there. And the problem we faced over the years was, there was no formalized naming within the stack. So anyone could have any number of fields. And this is a common problem. Anyone who's ever worked with a number of security vendors, for some reason, no one has sat down and formalized the naming convention. So like there's a million different variances of source IP for some reason. So we sat down and we're like, we're gonna put together a common schema. So this is the Elastic Common Schema that came first. I think early 2019 we published the first version, which basically allowed us to present a schema, which then we can build on top of. And now the detection rules follow that schema as well. So if anyone uses any of the data sets that we provide, anything in the common schema is going to work, including the detection rules. But it's also an open schema. So you can adapt it to your heart's content. You can add on to it. You can contribute to it. If you have a data source that we currently don't have an integration for, you can adapt it to the common schema, and then those rules are also going to work because they're written to work on that. So instead of targeting, generic field names for per device or anything like that, they're completely based on the schema. So it will work on anything that follows the schema, which means it's way easier and way more convenient for people to use. So it's not just the detection rules, right? It's pretty much everything in the stack. So the security product itself follows the common schema. All our visualizations, and it's grown to be adopted beyond security, so it's stack wide. So if someone uses our observability part of the product, the common schema is still valid there. So in the world where
and James, I'm sorry, that's beats too. So if I'm using beats to collect data, the other side of that as it comes into Elastic is in the common schema language, right? Or
correct,
I should say the Elastic Common Schema.
That's right. So specifically beats and their associated modules, because these days, a lot of the work is done for you via modules. But yeah, all of those follow the common schema. And that means if you have, CPU metrics, or if you have, a log coming from AWS billing, they're going to follow the common schema as well as your sysmon logs and as well as your firewall logs. So it's really handy to have that, because then you can correlate really easily across the data sources as well.
That's really awesome.
So
Piqued my interest with CPU as well. And being able to correlate those performance metrics along with the security metrics, I think is super powerful, right? Do you find that security people and operations people are using the product right in conjunction with each other?
Well, it's still fairly new to some. Some are, but the concept of being able to use those infrastructure metrics is still new to some. Mainly because not many security products allow you to do that. There are very few other products where you can put in those data sets side by side. So that concept is still a bit new, but once they find out about it, they realize the power it brings. So like there are certain attacks where or techniques that you can only figure out if you have those level of detail. So for example, cryptojacking is a really good example of that. The only way you're going to figure that out easily is if you see CPU spikes. Or we've seen a trend of cloud accounts getting compromised and then people spinning up machines to launch crypto miners. So like I mentioned billing metrics, if you see you have a really ridiculous odd spike in billing metrics, you can correlate that against your login activity, like what happened there. So once people do understand it, they do use it. But there's very few platforms that have allowed us practitioners to do that in the past. So it's still a fairly new concept.
Right. Either it's cryptojacking or someone's just running Google Chrome, right?
Google Chrome, major culprit.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's very interesting from a heuristic standpoint. Do you see a lot of rule generation starting to come forth, something like ransomware, where a file server's not, gonna spin up and have a huge CPU load, and then all of a sudden does that, like trying to encrypt all that data? Like, is there a lot of rules being written or heuristics that could be leveraged from that?
Absolutely. So I'll talk about what we're planning to do. So. And just flicking over back to that detections repository. So up until recently, all the rules were authored in two languages mainly for the stack. One is the Kibana query language. The other is Lucene query syntax. But in the latest version, we introduced EQL, which is something else we inherited from Endgame, which is the event query language. And what this allows us to do now is really easily cross-correlate that. We didn't have the capability to do that before easily. There were some ways in the stack, but it wasn't very straightforward. But now this gives us the ability to write those rules and also the community to write those rules. So there hasn't been a huge uptick yet in people designing these rules on the stack, but it's going to get there now with EQL. And I'm really excited because for someone who's used the Elastic Stack for so long in the security space, I've always missed that ability. It's one thing I really missed from other platforms. But now it's going to be available. And, Endgame had a ridiculously long repository of existing EQL rules. So the team is already working on migrating a bunch of those for some of the upcoming releases. So it's very exciting. We'll definitely see a big uptick in this style of rules being written for sure.
And the community has really taken on to this project. I mean, you described to me earlier a community very much so contributing back, taking these, developing new ones. If you can kind of speak to the community that's already very active.
Absolutely. So one of the things we did with the repository, when I say we, I mean the research team, they've published their full set of testing frameworks. So query validation, all that good stuff that you'd expect in a production environment, that's included in this repository, which means for someone to contribute, it's much easier than they'd expect. Everything is done for them, all the validation checks. So people have really latched onto that and started contributing. And we have a Slack channel. So there's an open Elastic Slack channel. And there's a couple of channels for security, one of them detections. And as soon as that happened, you see people contributing. It's crazy. It was literally the next day, people started publishing pull requests and opening issues on the repo. So there has been a massive uptick. And not only have they contributed to the rules themselves, they've even updated some of the tooling as well. So one of the tools that's provided as part of that is to load up these rules by a CLI tool. So our research team built a CLI tool. You put in your Kibana URL and it just uploads the rule. Someone actually published a pull request to make that a bit better. So something we call the space ID, which is essentially a unique tenant inside Kibana. So even to that level, they've been contributing, which is awesome. It really makes me smile. And the Slack channel is lit up with these community contributions, people asking questions. It's really been well received, which is great. It's really fantastic.
That's really awesome. So when I look at some of these rules that are in the GitHub repo, they're using EQL to query the Elastic platform to detect certain behaviors, such as a web server that's shoveling back a shell, right? And is that done with EQL? Is one of the options I have inside the rule?
So now, yes. So now you can as EQL. So with the background around that, so EQL is a really interesting story. So this was developed by Endgame to solve a specific problem, right? An easy, low learning curve language for analysts. And back then it was designed just to query the endpoint, right? So they offered an endpoint product, so it was designed just for that. Since they came on board, anyone who saw this at Elastic was like, this has to be the next language in Kibana. Like it was a no-brainer for us. It solved so many problems and had closed so many gaps that we're like, we really need to have this as part of the stack. So that started pretty much immediately. So both the folks that came along from Endgame, as well as the Elastic Search team, they started working on making that available in the stack pretty much straight away. And with the latest version, 7.9, it's actually there as an API call. With the upcoming release, it's going to be available as like a first-class citizen in the detection engine. So you will already find on that open repo some EQL rules. I want to stress this point a bit about the cross-team collaboration to make this happen, because it would have been really easy for us to just build some form of simple dummy wrapper for EQL on top of Elastic and just said, oh, just to say we have it. But what we did, we wanted to make sure that any language we introduced, first of all, would be easy to write rules for. So remove any existing caveats in Elasticsearch, and I'll talk a bit about those, as well as keeping it performant. So like one of the biggest reasons people start using Elastic is just because because of the phenomenal performance you get in terms of query speed. So we did not want to sacrifice that whatsoever. And EQL does fairly complex stuff. It does joins, it does sequences, or at least in the future it will do joins, but even sequences themselves can be considered joins. It does wildcard searches. It does a ton of stuff. So the Elasticsearch engineering team had to create even new data formats and new data types to support that efficiently. So like just seeing that level of commitment from the teams was incredible. And for them to have shipped it already in the latest release 7.9, I was blown away. So to answer your initial question, yes, you will already find some EQL rules in the detection repo, and then the next release, which will be 7.10, that will be like just natively part of the detection engine, which is fantastic.
That's really awesome. Leach, sorry, you had a question?
No, I was just going to ask. It sounds like you're adding improvements to EQL. How are you collecting data on what it could do better or where it needs to move? You have a lot of user input, or are you guys just sitting there thinking, I wish it did this, or what's the plan?
Yeah, so obviously there were criteria that we had to cover for it to be like a useful language, right? So one of them being the sequencing option, which basically allowed analysts to sequence events from multiple data sources. When that is designed, obviously there's performance criteria, there's running it on different data sets, so building benchmarks. So all of that was happening, testing it across different types of data as well, whether that's text, whether that's something we used to call a keyword in Elastic. So all of these things had to happen. One of the improvements we made, for example, which used to be a bit, really annoying for an analyst, was in Elasticsearch, because it's a search engine, the way you typically would search for a wildcard in most traditional languages used to be really expensive. So especially if it was indexed as something we call a keyword field. What the team has done is created now a new wildcard field, which basically allows you to have really easy wildcards. Any analyst would expect to type star, process name star, whatever, and have that performance. So even that had to happen, and testing performance on that. In fact, the team was able to get so much better performance running EQL on Elasticsearch than they ever had on the previous endpoint, which is pretty phenomenal. So all of these things had to happen. All of these checks were done. Running it on real data sets. So making sure that we're not running it on data sets which don't typically appear in the wild as well. So the team was initially testing with data sets from previous MITRE evaluations, even like real world data sets like from open clusters, data from our InfoSec team as an example. So just making sure that it will work efficiently and provide the results an analyst wants. So all of these things had to happen in the background as well.
Sounds like you got an awesome team working really tightly together.
It's like, for me, it's so humbling. Like, honestly, working alongside some of these people is just unreal. Like, you have people who are devoting so much time to something that is going to go out for free. Like it's it's one of those things where people genuinely care. Like it's not our main goal at Elastic. We want to protect the world's data from attack and arm every analyst, and we really stick to it. Like the security team themselves, because we've been in practitioner shoes, we've been on the other side of the line. Like we really understand the frustration. So everyone really cares. It's not a thing. Oh, let's just ship it. We'll get it out there and then we'll fix it after. Like that's why that's one of the reasons we don't publish release dates, because if something is not good enough, we will wait till it's good enough. So people really care, and it's just again really humbling to work alongside. Like these people are some of the best in the industry, both from the engineering side, the detection rule creation themselves is like phenomenal work.
Very cool.
James,
that's really cool. Sorry, go ahead.
What percentage of the rules are written by Elastic, and what are user contributed, and how are you managing those contributions?
That's a good question. So right now, I mean, we still have a pretty high percentage that's contributed from Elastic. So I'd still say it's probably 90% right now. The way we manage those contributions is for someone to contribute, they do have to sign a contributor agreement, just because we do have some conditions. And also what happens there is it goes through all of the tests I previously mentioned. So like there's a lot of testing that goes through it, mainly to make sure that when it ends up in the hands of a user, they're going to have a good time. So like,
right,
we check syntax, we check that, make sure it's not going to be too expensive as a query. We make sure, that it will actually provide efficient results. So there's actually a whole philosophy page for someone who's looking to contribute to read, to see like how our teams would work internally. So when they come to contribute, like just make sure they adapt to some of that philosophy as well. So like there are even some suggestions like, listen, if you're going to write this type of rule, why don't you think about it this way and this way first? And there's a couple of steps you should think about. So like, even if it's someone's like first venture into something like this, and maybe they're a bit new at it, but they want to give it a shot, they have some steps to follow. So like, these are people providing advice, that have been doing it for years, their entire career, and just to say, hey, here's what we think and what we found typically works best. Why don't you try and adapt your rule to that? So there's the contribution guide, but then there's also the philosophy. So then what happens is it goes through all these tests. There's a couple of people who validated on our side, just to give it the thumbs up, give it the okay, and then it gets committed. So we still own all the final commits ourselves as the Elastic, but and this is true for all the Elastic code. Anyone can contribute, but we still own all the final commits.
And then James, do you maintain that moving forward? Because what I've found with user contributed kind of projects is I've got a specific challenge, and I'm like, oh, a user contributed something for that. And I'm like, oh, but that was a year or more ago, and that doesn't work with the latest version, and therefore, like, I have to retrofit it myself. So are you maintaining those user contributions moving forward?
So yes, the answer is going to be yes, and that's one of the reasons why there's so much automation in place as well. So GitHub makes it really easy these days with GitHub Actions and GitHub sequences and things like that. So a lot of that is automated. It's just someone at Elastic has a final look through and say, okay. Again, the team has been phenomenal at keeping up with this stuff, like even in terms of contribution. So like the plan is to keep that going forward. And if there's any manual steps we can take out, I'm sure the team will think about that. But right now, there is going to be that manual check.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize that might slow the process down a bit, right? But as an end user, I appreciate that testing process, because, like I said, in other frameworks and open source projects, if you just can't get the pieces to fit together, I'm like, I can do it faster, but it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, and it's as well quality over quantity. Like we'd love to say we have 10,000 rules,
right.
But if even one of them spams someone with 1 million false positives a day, that sucks. Like we don't want that to happen, like by far. Right. So like we really want to make sure that doesn't happen, because alert fatigue, as we all know, is a huge problem. So like if we can avoid that as much as we can, that would be great. So there will still be someone checking those for sure.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm going to do my best to speak Maltese. What do you guys do to pursue or help out with customers that have to pursue compliance according to the Industrie Talcards Talclass? That's PCI and Maltese, by the
Oh
way.
yeah,
Wow.
that was very close.
And by
I made
very
some
close,
of
you
that
mean
out
not
there.
at all.
Not at all.
You're too nice, James. You're too nice.
Missed it by that much.
So right now we haven't really gone down the route of like following like a compliance standard. So like we don't have the concept yet of like, oh, you have PCI, here are these rules that help you get through your audit. We haven't done that yet. Right now they're more like based on things like certain attack types and vulnerabilities and things like that. In fact, it's part of the philosophy page. What we have done is adopt the MITRE ATT&CK taxonomy. So we're basically building on the work of giants. Like what the MITRE team has done is phenomenal, and that's pretty much adapted throughout the whole security solution. So for every rule, or pretty much almost all the rules, you will find MITRE ATT&CK tactics and techniques, and now even the sub techniques as well. So we have done that, but we haven't gone down the road of like, oh, I have PCI compliance, I have HIPAA, I have all this stuff. Here are these rules. We haven't done that yet.
If you've done MITRE ATT&CK, you've pretty much done PCI.
Yeah, so
But-
that's what we thought as well. Like you pretty much can't walk outside your house without hearing about MITRE these days. So like everyone's gonna ask about it. And again, as someone who was a practitioner and all the researchers were practitioners, we found MITRE super helpful. Like for someone to have listed out all those techniques and tactics and just really like go into the details about here's what someone's going to try and do, stop them by following this, it's been really helpful. And anyone who's seen the framework knows how helpful it's been. It's become a standard, right? Like you're going to get asked about it. All the other frameworks have followed it as well. So like, again, we're not the first to open a detections repository. So we'll have people, the great work of the Sigma team, one of our partners, SOC Prime, has done a phenomenal job with their like threat detection marketplace. So like we're not the first to do it, and those have also gone down the MITRE route. So we learned from them as well. Like that has worked for them. Like we'll follow suit as well. And also Endgame as a product itself was very tied into MITRE. In fact, they were one of the first to adopt the framework. So yeah, I mean, it's why reinvent the wheel,
James, I noticed that Mac OS is listed there, but there aren't necessarily detection rules for that. Is that something that's coming soon?
Yeah, in fact, you'll notice there's a PR for that. So in reality, a lot of the Linux rules overlap with Mac OS.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them have been adapted to that. There are more coming, of course. Like there's way more that we've been thinking of. But right now, we all know, like in terms of market share and all that stuff, Windows is still way up there. So a lot of our focus tends to go there. You'll notice as well, like recently, one of our biggest focuses has been, cloud and DevSecOps and all that sort of stuff. So you'll see there's Azure, GCP, AWS, Okta rules. So like even from that side, is something we've been focusing on. Mac is definitely a focus to us. Like, but let's be clear, and you'll see that a PR in there to shift some of the Linux rules to work a bit better for Mac OS as well. So
and then it's a question like which version too, right? Because how you do some of those command line detections in Mac OS has, I mean, not just changed, but like it's like not even close to being the same from version to version.
Yeah, and even the way we collect data is changing, right? So even with Big Sur, and now having to move to like system extensions of kernel extensions for the way we collect like security telemetry and all that. And there are big changes in macOS all the time. Again, it shouldn't really be an excuse. Like we should be on top of that because it's important anyway. But so that's one of the things we're doing is we're grabbing all our Linux-based rules and just making them work in the same way for the macOS variants. So that is happening, and you'll find a PR for it already. But yeah, there will be more focus for macOS as well because another thing, we need them at Elastic. So we most of us run Mac. So our InfoSec team would definitely appreciate more macOS rules.
And what about support for applications, especially browsers, right? I mean, talking about the browser, we say it's the new operating system, right? But it's certainly a super important application, not without its vulnerabilities and shortcomings. Certainly, are there rules that are specific or ones in the works to, check for behavior inside of browsers and or the configuration of browsers?
Yeah, so there are a few that will probably get ported over once EQL is in there. So, for example, we had rules in the Endgame platform which would look at someone trying to look at the Chrome password database, for example.
Yeah.
And that's done by certain Windows API calls that can be made. So right now we're working on the most efficient way to collect that API telemetry. So especially from the new endpoint, we haven't gone down that far yet. It is coming. So once that happens, then we'll be able to look at all the browser activity. Another thing is looking at exploits within browsers. So like all of that stuff as well, not just people interacting with browser processes, but exploits living within the browser themselves. So that's also something that's in the works. So in time, we'll get there. It's just, obviously appreciate this is a lot of work especially for the data collection side, because again, even Windows changes their APIs a lot and what we're allowed to do there as well. So once that happens, once we're able to get that deep telemetry, we'll be able to help more there as well.
And the rules, I should clarify, are more focused on looking for attacks, not necessarily configuration and or misconfiguration, correct?
Yeah, but it's not something we're shying away from doing either. So eventually we want, similar to something like OpenSCAP, where it's looking for bad configuration and that sort of stuff. Eventually that is something we're considering. Maybe not as part of the detection engine itself, maybe more part of the endpoint where you can configure, like, let's look for, application misconfiguration, or like you're not adapted to this like CIS standard or whatever. And that is something we might consider doing, but probably would be more towards what the endpoint does rather than being part of the detection engine.
Right. And more questions from the rest of the co-hosts?
So maybe not a question, but I think maybe a testament. I want to hear a little bit more about your story into where you are at Elastic, because as we were talking, I was reading a bunch of stuff, and is it based on what I gathered, you made it to where you are at Elastic by being an Elastic user before you were even employed there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like that was a really funny story, because again, it was one of those things where you never expect it to happen. So like even just finding out about Elastic as a product. So I remember exactly how that happened. So I used every technology under the sun before I started using Elastic. And one of the times I was using a product, I won't say the name, but I was basically doing a Google search about how to create security, like nice looking security dashboards in product X, and Elastic came up. Like there was a screenshot of a Kibana. I'm like, what's this? And like I stumbled into that, and at first I'm like, wow, this looks primitive. Like Elastic had just come out, especially specifically Kibana had just started. And I'm like, you know what? Listen, I'm just gonna test this from a let's see if it solves one of my problems, which is speed. And I remember I put a terabyte of Brewcode proxy logs inside of a one node of Elasticsearch, and it was. I thought there was some mistake. I didn't realize, I couldn't comprehend how fast I got the results back. And that just led me to start experimenting with the product. Then I had the opportunity to, be part of a MSSP startup. So I was the first technical person there, well, pretty much almost like a part of the co-founding of it. And, I had a big decision into what product we'd use. And I'm like, we should really go for Elastic. And we became partners of Elastic. So Elastic back then didn't even have any form of security offering. It's just the platform itself. And I built everything on top of that. And it was just like, for everything I tried to do, there was an answer. And that was really what struck me. Like, even though there was no native solutions yet, there was still a way to do it. Like, if I needed to bring in some obscure log from the firewall from 20 years ago, I was able to do it. If it was an IBM iSeries device or an AS400, there was some way I was able to get a log inside of Elasticsearch. If I needed to make an API call or look up a relational database, I was able to do it. So that really got me deep into Elastic itself and learning about its use as a search engine and all the ins and outs of it. So that happened for a few years, and then it became a bit too political for me at the age I was, and I left that in the capable hands. But I moved on to RS2, which was mentioned, and that was the second time I was a customer of Elastic. And funnily enough, I remember going to an Elasticon in February 2018, actually. So the last big Elasticon Elastic had in San Francisco, and Elastic again still had no security offering, like essentially. It was used in the security space because of some of the reasons I mentioned, but
Right.
it still hosted these small groups discussions, what they say. And one of them was for security. And I'm like, okay, I'll go there. And again, for a platform with no security offering, we were in a room close to about almost 100 people. Like, it was pretty crazy. And I just couldn't shut up about all the things I had done and learned on Elastic. And essentially, some people at Elastic overheard me, and they're like, "Hey, would you be interested in joining this team that we're building for security specialists?" And basically, the ball rolled from there, and here we are. So I joined at the right time, because just literally a month after I joined, Elastic made a formal decision to build a security product. So it was literally perfect timing, because from then I was able to even influence that, help in some decisions that were taken, see the whole evolution to where we are today, but also really help our users and our customers down that journey. So for every customer or user that I spoke to, they were all having challenges, which some of which I solved in the past. So I was just able to share all of that with them, and it was just really good timing, because I'm like, listen, this is what there is today, but we're on a path to make this so much better for you. And just seeing how that evolved, again, I'm blown away, because all the stuff we've mentioned, like EQL, detection engine, security product, all this time a year ago, less than half of that existed. So the engineering teams were just phenomenal pace of building stuff. And then obviously we joined forces with Endgame. So basically we inherited over 100 amazing security people. That's research team, engineers, data scientists, you name it, we had that. So it's just even for people who adopted Elastic, that's really set their mind at rest. Okay, Elastic is totally focused on security. And here we are today. Here we are with a product which, again, is considering other products in the market, is still fairly new from that perspective. But it's out there, man. People are using it. People are excited. People are happy that there's a differentiating product, and that it's free and open. So yes, of course, we do have a commercial side to the product, but the fact that anyone, literally anyone, can go and have an enterprise grade security product without first having to worry about having that $1 million budget and solve their problem, and then perhaps come to Elastic for subscription. But that's game changing. Very few, if any, can say that. Anyone, not someone with a big budget, anyone can go and use this product, whether that's someone at home, whether that's someone who has a small business, whether that's someone who is a big business, but they're struggling with some other products. They can go and use us for as long as they like, and they can build on top of us, and they can do whatever they need, and we won't have any objection to that. So it's been such. Go ahead, sorry.
Do you see that as a good and viable way to do business? I mean, I appreciate it, and I really do kind of get behind that whole concept, but from a business standpoint, and you're not the other guy that's more the marketing side, do you see that as it's working for Elastic and currently a good kind of scheme?
So I say, if we weren't that way, we would not be where we are today. I can hand on heart say that if we didn't have a free offering, we wouldn't have the success we've had. And I mean, we're a publicly traded company, so everyone can see our numbers, and they can see the growth quarter from quarter, year after year. So if people just look at that, they can tell we're doing well, and it's worked really well for us as a business model. And it's it's something we hold very near and dear to our heart. And the community itself, again, we're always appreciative of community. It's not going to change. So I can genuinely say it has worked for us. And I think if we didn't do that, we would have failed. If we didn't have a free offering, we wouldn't have been this successful for sure.
Now, having said that, James, there's also a paid offering, and I think what we often wonder about, and our audience does too, is what's the difference between the free version and the paid version, and what's the path that you typically see people going down when they do reach that point where they're like, yeah, you know what, we should probably go get a license because of those reasons.
So there's a couple of reasons. First and foremost, we have there's the feature side of it, of course. So machine learning, which is basically unsupervised anomaly detection, which means as an analyst, I've basically added another 1,000 members to my team. That's the way I like to put it. So it's learning unusual behavior, the unknown unknowns, that sort of stuff. You have external alerting. You have typical stuff that you'd expect from a product. But apart from all those incredible features, and the enterprise grade features and all that, you have an incredible support team. So I can hand on heart say that more than half of the things I know about Elastic came from my interaction with support when I was a customer. Because our support is not like, oh, my cluster's down, please help me. It's, listen, I have this bit of data. What would be the best way for me to do X, Y, and Z with it and bring it into the stack? So it's like they're holding your hand at each step on the way. And that for me is already invaluable, let alone all those incredible features. Just having that is already enough to pay that price. Plus, you get peace of mind as an enterprise that there's always going to be someone to help you if you need it. There's emergency things like patch releases for paying customers, like even sort of having that. You come to a situation where some organizations can't run unsupported software. So as much as they like, it just can't happen. So it's a fact. And so there's a combination of these things. So additionally as well, some people try to build these features themselves on the free version, which if you're capable you can do. But let's face it, sometimes it offloads the cost versus the people cost anyway. So right. That's another reason why too.
Yeah, and I've often said, and I think folks get the wrong impression of this. It's oh well, we want support so we have someone to blame. No, you want support so that you can interact with product management, right? So that you can help define requirements. You can help tell Elastic, in this case, here's how I'm using the product. Make sure these features are continued to be supported and improved upon, right? Where in the open source world, it's a different type of relationship, right, between the open source product and a commercial product.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we, as much as we love our community, we love our customers. So we have these sessions all the time. We have, when we were building the security product, even still, we openly reach out to our customers so we know, we'll have a big impact for them. And listen, what do you think about these design ideas? What do you think about us putting this button here? We actively do that with our customers, just to make sure that we can make assumptions about what our customers want, but let's face it, our customers know what they want. So that happens all the time as well. We have obviously customer support managers. Customer can speak to people like myself. People like our solutions architecture team. They're part of an account team, just like the salesperson is, and all those people are. So there's that relationship as well. Let's not take that for granted. Something you get as well. So there's so many benefits to it too. And we're also not forgetting so apart from the subscription-based licenses, there's also our SaaS service. So you can sign up for an Elastic cluster on our cloud platform monthly and not have to worry about hosting a cluster yourself. So that's also another aspect of our business, and which is very, very growing really fast. You can ask our SRE team how fast that's growing, but that's also another thing to consider. Even just having that managed for you is already, especially in the security space where we're in the traditional SIM world with rack and stack devices. Now the fact that you can go to a UI, click a button, and within a couple of minutes you have a security product and you're good to go. That's already enough.
James, earlier you mentioned creating dashboards as a challenge that you had as a security engineer. Many of us have been faced with that same challenge. How easy or difficult in the free and commercial products, if there are differences in how I create dashboards, right? Because I find it's easy to get to the point where you're collecting a lot of data. Visualizing it is yet a separate challenge, right?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I hated when I was in security day-to-day on Blue Team side. It was oh, give us a dashboard, give us a single pane of glass. So, oh God, no.
Yeah, oh God, no.
Kill me. So in Elastic, there's a couple of ways to build visualizations. First of all, it's pretty much the same whether it's free or paid. You get very similar visualizations, and it's very easy. So again, you put your data in. First of all, we ship with a ton of dashboards. So if you use our modules, they actually come with dashboards apart from the security UI itself, which is a totally created UI. But if you wanted to create your own, it's all point and click, drag and drop. In fact, recently we introduced this new way of building visualizations called Lens, which makes it even easier. So you don't even have to be a technical person to build them. So you have basically all the data that's available to you and all the fields. You're you know what? I want a time-based chart of hosts logging in. So instead of you typing that out in a query fashion, you drag and drop. So like you drag a host name, you drag a field of host names, you drag a time, and it builds it for you. And then you can have a dashboard of different lens visualizations. Apart from dashboards, then we also have this concept called Canvas, which takes dashboarding to a whole other level because it's basically a fully free-form workpad which you can make your own. So like you can put images on there, you can put GIFs if you wanted to, you can make animations, you can have it like change with values. So like if you wanted to, you can have like, what's my state of, I don't know, what's my mitre attack posture, and you can have like things fill up automatically based on the data inside of Elastic. So there are so many ways, and it's very, very easy at least compared to other products, I feel. And another thing, like you can go whole hog and build your own like plugins and even your own UI. So we have customers do that. We have customers who use Elasticsearch as a backend data store, and they totally eliminate our UI, which we don't really have a problem with. And they build their own on top of it because Elasticsearch is just a RESTful, a RESTful service. So there are people doing that as well. Like, so it's pretty crazy. You get a choice, right? Either use anything Elastic give you and build based on our tools, or build your own.
And in terms of getting the data in, I have these what I call Paul's like enchanted quadrants, right? Where you want logs from the network, you want endpoint telemetry, you want threat intelligence, and then you want to bring that all back into a SIM-like product. Like, what's your typical customer, or open source? Like, I'm just getting into Elastic and I want to go start collecting stuff. Like, what's your recommendation to go start filling in all of Paul's kind of enchanted quadrants?
Oh yeah. So these days, if you're starting from scratch, I would recommend our new agent. So in 7.9, we completely overhauled the concept of how to bring data inside of Elastic. So where we used to have, or we still have, the concept of what we call a beat, where it's essentially a lightweight agent, which has a concept of a module. So for example, if I wanted Windows events, I'd download WinLogBeat, turn on the Windows module, and perhaps have something like Sysmon, turn on the Sysmon module, sends it straight to Elastic. Now we have the concept of a unified agent, which essentially means within the interface, you're like, listen, I would like to adopt the Nginx package. I would like to have the Palo Alto module in there, and I want to put it on these 4 hosts. You click a button, and it does it for you. And it updates any policies going forward. So like these days, agent is the future for Elastic. Like that's the way we're going. You can still, of course, have beats or whatever else you want. But like if someone was starting today, I would say start with agent. Like it's pretty game changing in terms of ease of use and also ease of maintenance as well. Because if you have and we do have, for example, some users and customers with 200,000 beats deployed. That's a heck of a lot of infrastructure to manage. Right. So like this is one of the main pushes for something like Agent and something we call Fleet that's tied into Agent, where we'll give you an easy way to maintain that. So that would be my recommendation to start. Again, at Elastic, we give you all the tools you need, but if you have a preferred way, please go ahead and do that. So like if you, like I'm wearing a Corelight t-shirt here, so on the other sleeve. Corelight make fantastic like network capture products like based off of Zeek. So like if you have something like that, and Corelight in particular support ECS and send it straight to Elastic, go ahead. If you're a fan of our syslog, if you're a fan of NXlog, syslog NG, FluentD, whatever, use those. Like we're not going to stop you, but my recommendation would be use Agent, especially if you're new, because it just solves a lot of problems.
And the Agent platform support today, Windows, Linux, and any other platforms supported on the Agent side?
Windows, Linux, and macOS, yeah. Okay. All 3 are supported.
Gotcha.
How's the footprint? How's the footprint of the Agent?
So I can speak from the endpoint security side. So like our endpoint security is an integration on top of Agent, and we've tried to keep that as lightweight as possible. Like again, because the last thing you want is to put a product on there and have ridiculously terrible performance. It's still in beta, so there's still a few kinks we need to work out. Like I don't have exact figures in my head, but I know it's pretty low. In fact, I ran it on all of my machines, and I haven't noticed anything. apart from that, like today with beats as an example, you can actually monitor host level performance. So you can see, for example, oh, this beat is taking up X amount of CPU and X amount of memory. So perhaps with agent, again, I can't speak on behalf of the agent team, but I feel that possibly is going to come to agent as well. So you can monitor sort of that level too. So like it's a fairly low footprint. Like I don't have numbers, but it's low.
Certainly a lot less than Chrome, which is most software on the planet today.
Yeah, but it's like, again, we learned from our own frustrations, right? Like if you have a product where the security team is like, oh, we need it, but every other team in the organization is going to say, no, we can't because it's terrible, then no one's going to adopt it. Like, so what's the point? So like, this is one of the things, like, again, we learned a lot from Endgame because this is something they really heavily focused on. Like, there are third-party reports which show this. So like, particularly things like AV comparatives where you can see we score really high, as in, when I say high, as in it was a low performance hit.
Right.
And I think we're in the top 3 there for and so we've learned from what Endgame have done, and we're building on top of those existing frameworks and what that team accomplished. So again, it's not designing from scratch. So like we have all this experience from building a really efficient endpoint that we're learning from.
Jeff?
So I keep thinking about, I don't know how many years ago it was, maybe 20 years ago, where this new game-changing software package became available that everybody was talking about, this little thing called Lotus 123. Some people might have heard of it. And it was so hyped about doing such amazing things, and I don't even know what category you would put it in these days. But I remember getting a job somewhere where I got Lotus 123, and I opened it up, and I'm like, okay, now what? So my question to you is, given that you have a free version, which is outstanding, what are sort of the minimum qualifications? What are some of the things that people should have in their capabilities set, their aptitude set to be able to to be able to tackle your freeware project and dig into it and get something out of it?
As Michael Santarcangelo used to say, how tall do you need to be to ride this ride?
That's a good way to put it. Thanks, Larry.
So that's actually a really good question. So there's 2 parts to that. So first of all, if it's going to be someone maintaining it and installing it, that's a different set of skills needed than someone's going to use the software. So obviously, if you're going to be someone that's installing it, you're going to need some Linux experience, or you can actually install it on Windows or Mac OS, whatever you want. But just interacting with the command line and that sort of stuff, you're going to need to be familiar with it just to get it up and running as a service. Again, unless you go for like the hosted solution. But if you do decide to run it yourself, you need that some sort of experience there. Again, no need like years of experience, but just familiarity with running command line based stuff. Again, if you're a Docker fan or a Kubernetes fan, we have solutions for you there as well. So if you prefer that road and you want to host it like that, obviously familiarity with things like Docker and Kubernetes. But then once it's up and once you're using it, there's very little. Like you have to. The biggest thing I say, you have to have an appetite for thinking outside the box a bit, especially if you want to build your own dashboards and things like that. But if you're, let's say, security analyst, and you want the skills to use Elastic, there isn't much. Like I would say, get used to the concept of a centralized search platform, whatever that may be, whether it's Elastic or not. But other than that, like I really wouldn't think there's like some specific skill, because at Elastic itself, we use Elastic everywhere, and that's folks from marketing, engineering, sales, and these people don't have like engineering, not everyone would have engineering experience and things like that. So like they're able to use it just by pointing and clicking. So I would say it looks different from someone standing it up versus someone using it every day. And again, if you asked me this question a couple of years back, I would say you need to be handy with RESTful APIs and making calls like that. You would need some sort of the understanding what an aggregation is and understanding what a term is and a keyword and mapping. It's like, I would say you need to understand all those first. But today, the way the product has evolved, that's all abstracted from the user. You can still get into that level of detail if you wanted to, but it's not like the first thing you'd need to do. Whereas before you had no choice, but now it's all pretty much UI based. So I'd say these days it's much easier to get started.
James, we just have 5 questions left for you, and there are 5 questions with Security Weekly. They're 5 silly questions. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Absolutely.
3 words to describe yourself.
Inquisitive, annoying, and shy.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
A screwdriver.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
How to act oddly in front of a group of people.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Second.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Good job, Lee.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. So, Jerry Stiller, who just passed away.
Nice.
And I'll actually take the whole King of Queens, the whole King of Queens set. So Kevin James, Jerry Stiller, and anyone else on that set really.
Oh my God, that's the best answer all year.
Fantastic. James, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a blast.
For folks who want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/elastic. We're going to take a short break, come back with the security news for this week. Stay tuned.